BeTheTalk, episode 132, featuring Kristen Moeller. Welcome to BeTheTalk. We go behind the talk 7 days a week for tips and techniques to help you change the world. I'm Nathan Eckel, and a talker myself. I'm interviewing others who change the world with their talk. You can too, even if you've never given a talk before. Let's get started with today's show. We are live with Kristen Moeller. Kristen, are you ready to talk?
I am ready to talk.
Literary agent and author Kristen Moeller has 30-plus years experience in the personal growth field and 10-plus years experience in publishing. A 3-time Tedx speaker, she has been featured on NPR, ABC, NBC, Fox News, The New York Times, Huffington Post, and after her house burned down in 2012, she had a stint on Tiny House Nation. Kristen lives in the mountains of Colorado with her husband, along with a Rhodesian Ridgeback and 2 pit bull rescues. Kristen Moeller, welcome to the talk.
Thank you very much. It's really nice to be here.
Your talk is called Forged by Fire, and we heard about it in the bio. Now, Talk Universe, do not go up to Kristen and say something like, oh, isn't it wonderful? You have so much less to be connected to. Isn't it wonderful to be through that? Because we found out in her talk that this romanticized idea that all your stuff burns up in a fire and you're somehow freed from all these attachments doesn't really work that way. So please take us behind the talk, Kristen.
Oh, yes. It's so freeing it must be so freeing to not have any stuff, as we literally heard out of the mouth of a dear friend, I'm sure meaning well, but yes, don't wax eloquent when someone is faced with a loss like that. It's not freeing. It wasn't freeing. Forged by fire is not a pleasant experience. Attempt to put yourself into a burning flame. Just run your finger gently across the top of a candle, and if you go quickly, it might not hurt. But this one was not a quick. It was not a quick flame. It was something that overtook our lives and turned everything upside down. And people also often ask, what's the biggest lesson you got from the fire? And that's another no, I think, because I think the biggest lesson is there isn't a big lesson. There are lots of little lessons, and it's about continuing to walk through fire. And yes, our hides are tougher. We have scars from the burn. We're not the same people that we were before, and it's not something that I would ever ask for again. It's still, and your issues don't just get burned away. Your attachments don't just get burned away. There's piles of paperwork that has to be done when you lose everything, and that's not freeing. So, yes, Forged by Fire is not something I'd wish on even my biggest enemies. Not that I really have any.
You mentioned it's not an acronym, but you mentioned the phrase stop, drop, and roll.
Stop, drop, and roll. Yes.
Take us behind those tips.
Yeah. So, and this has evolved over time because I'm not the same person that gave that talk, but stop, drop, and roll. It's that I had to play with something. I had to bring humor. And that is something I did learn, because we have to approach these things that just take us to our knees. We have to bring some humor. Otherwise, I think we go a little crazy. So stop, drop, and roll was that childhood thing that, they don't still do it. I had to actually search for that and find the graphic for that, but it's what we were taught. If you happen to catch on fire, stop, don't run, stop, drop to the ground, and roll to extinguish the fire. So I was looking at it more, of course, practically speaking, but then more kind of spiritually of stop, it's really just stop the action. And then drop, you could say, those that meditate, you could say kind of drop into the experience, but be with whatever's going on. Be with your own angst and your own stress, and kind of just try to be grounded in the moment, because there's a lot of, when you're going through trauma, there's a lot, it actually is contrary to what we want to do, because we want to run, but if we run, it follows. So and this can be like a stop, drop, and roll just for a minute. Okay, stop, drop, and roll just for a second. It doesn't mean you have to spend like the whole next week stopping and dropping into it. And rolling was really the roll with it, like just keep on keeping on. So again, it doesn't mean that you're going to, there were plenty of times that I ran and numbed out and watched really bad TV and got addicted to a new, watched now Game of Thrones, things like that, but just trying to bring some play.
So, stop, drop, and roll. So that's no longer taught in the schools.
Well, I don't know.
The new thing? I'm sorry to go there, but that's an interesting piece.
Well, I'm not sure it's no longer taught, but it just seems like it's something. I don't know how old you are, but it's definitely something from my childhood that I don't see so much that teaching. So it's kind of like Smokey the Bear. Where'd he go? Everything he
what
taught
happened?
was
Or Mr. Yuck.
Yeah, I don't know who
I miss him.
But yeah, I miss Smokey.
Well, I think when they phased out duck and cover, maybe that's when they phased in stop, drop, and roll. So
right. Yes.
Yeah. So, we're having fun with this, but I remember as a child, I had several friends whose houses they burned down and really have to go through the dislocation aspects and then the loss of stuff and the way that everything has to be pieced together in your life. So what's your advice for anyone in Talk Universe right now that maybe it's not a fire, maybe it's not a homelessness or a displacement there, but there's a real there's been a real interruption somewhere. How the stop, drop, and roll. What would you specifically say to them to help get them back on track?
Finding the places where you really can stop and drop, and kind of in some of it's dropping all the things you have to do, but finding safe places, safe people that are your people, where you can really truly unwind and not have to perform and not have to be back in it and in action and producing. Because you may still have to be doing that, but at least if you know that you've got your places where you can just completely lose it, and not, I think our society kind of rewards the get back into action so quickly. And, we reward people for doing so well. She's doing so well even after her 2 kids were killed in the car accident. Why is that a good thing that someone's doing so well? But, we just get back to work. We have this fast-paced society. So finding the places where you can really stop and I'm not even suggesting stop and feel, just stop and be, just stop and be messy, just stop and be human, stop and express your agony and finding that outlet. Because if you don't, it's going with you anyway. That's the stuff that doesn't just burn away. You're taking it with you and it will suck you dry. It will, my husband processed a lot differently. Because of my background as a therapist and, doing my own work over the years and being a woman and being naturally someone who does talk about my feelings, I did a lot more of that. I wrote and all of that, whereas my husband, kind of typical male, held a lot more inside, and it actually impacted him in some ways on a, kind of the PTSD symptoms, some ways longer than it impacted me. So you got to find your outlets. You got to find ways to off gas.
Well, and this is very fascinating to me because we started the conversation. We're talking about being forged by fire. We're talking about your really unfortunate experience of the fire and having to flee and all of that. So we've morphed from physical safety and physical danger, and your answers are really steering closer to psychological safety, social safety, emotional safety is much more important for the long term. Not, after you get past the moments, if you get past the moments of sheer danger, the rest of the long game is emotional safety and psychological safety and all of that. And I guess that makes sense.
And back to if someone's not going through something right now, I'm a big, be a prepper in this area, prepping for disaster, not going overboard, but have your lists of things that you would take, have your, even we still haven't completely done this, in our new house, but having each other, each member of the family know what is important, have the list, what's important, where are the bags to pile in the stuff, what really needs to go, what would you just be devastated to lose. So you don't live with your suitcase by the door, but you prepare. And then also there are companies that do home inventory lists. So actually have things videoed and photographed so you know the contents of your house. Because when you go through insurance after you've lost everything, recalling stuff is really difficult. And let me say one other thing on that too is don't be a hero. Don't think you're going to stay home and fight the fire and, you and your hose on your roof. Just don't let go of that. Just leave. When they say leave, leave. Just leave.
Well, we'll leave that to, this is the inside joke from before the recording, but we'll leave that to Bob Kittredge, who you'll remember is my coach from episode 100. And we didn't say he was a member of the Forest Service, so he's fire's worst nightmare. So I got to put a plug out to Bob whenever I possibly can.
It's so hard.
Don't be the hero.
Yeah, people, right. People, I think it's especially a male thing of I'm going to stay and I'm going to defend my castle. And, while admirable, there were people who died in our fire, and it's just not, the defensible spaces, the supposedly non-flammable material that we used for building, it just, when a fire's coming through and it's raging hot and moving fast, you don't want to mess with it.
For sure. Now, this has been a really fun conversation with Kristen Moeller, whose talk was called Forged by Fire. We're going to continue this in just a moment, and we'll be right back with the Blitz Round. People ask, how could I start a 7-day-a-week podcast? It's because of what I've learned from my mentors. Some of the best mentors in history aren't around anymore. They've left hours of one-on-one mentoring behind in their books. Each month at Classics on Tap, I record a new chapter from a classic business book to help you make a difference. Download your first chapter at classicsontap.com. And welcome back, Talk Universe. We are back with the Blitz Round. Kristen, are you ready?
I am ready.
I'm going to ask you a series of questions, either or, pointing to the preparation and performance of your talk. Here's the first question. Were you selected to speak, Kristen, or did you apply?
Selected.
Are you a memorizer, an improviser, or a blender?
Memorizer for that talk, blender normally, and I actually like improvising most.
Yeah, a bunch of us do. Would you consider yourself a seasoned performer or new to the stage?
Seasoned, but still scared.
Well, that was my next question. Did you have nerves, or were you in the zone, or neither, or both?
Good God, man. Nerves. Are you kidding? I was in the zone completely, but nerves.
Wow, both. Okay. Well, how do you get into the zone when you still have nerves?
If you don't have nerves, I don't know if you're alive. So, I think some nerve, they're just going to, hands are going to sweat. Moisture will come out of your body in places that you don't want it to. It's part of the deal. It means we're alive. So I think being in the zone is because I prepared. I took it seriously. I memorized it. I did my time. I practiced. I worked with a coach, all of that. I actually flubbed it on dry run and actually started crying in front of and then on the actual day I didn't flub.
Nice recovery.
Mm-hmm.
That's excellent. What is a tip, a technique, or a tool that helped you other than the dry run?
Really the memorization. I had a coach and just taking the time to go through it. It's not, I guess today with some TED Talks, some people are actually using notes. I didn't use notes. And so just spending your time and go way in advance, really, really put in the hours.
Yeah, just a editorial comment. I am not an organizer, but from everything that I can see, Talk Universe, do not go up there with notes. It may not be approved for publication.
Although, actually, now the Chris Anderson, the head of TED, in his book, talks about that people I think they're loosening on that. They are letting people use notes. Yeah,
I missed that on the book.
They're realizing that it's just different. Some people have different strengths. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, if you're going to use notes, I'm going to edit this. I'm going to edit myself. Leave this in, team. But if you're going to use notes, have the dog-eared page in Chris Anderson, the head of Ted's book, so that you can talk it and show it to everybody.
Exactly.
Better way to do it. What was this is the cut for time question? What was the most painful part of the talk to cut out?
I tend to over-explain. So I think it was just knowing that cutting it down to the bare bones was overall a painful experience, and trusting that was enough. So I tend to put in too much detail all over the place.
Well, I resemble that comment as well. So now it's a performance. So what was the most unexpected, strange, or just plain weird thing that happened during or right before your talk?
Well, I think crying the day before was really, and because I have not had to do a dry run, and because this particular one was a really big deal. I mean, they did it was quite a production. So bursting into tears in front of all these people who were my peers. And that was the scariest thing for me, is more in front of my peers than just a general audience. So that threw me. That really threw me, because I thought, oh my God, that has never happened to me before. Literally, I just stopped mid-sentence and didn't know what to do.
But
so I carried that.
In your defense, I mean, this is a highly emotional talk for you. I mean, your home burned down. You had to flee.
That's less the thing for me. That's actually less. I could talk to you and talk from an emotional level and not have a problem with that. If you just asked me to get up for half an hour or 20 minutes and share, I could do that. But the timed factor of a TED Talk, and then knowing the potential for distribution of it, and knowing what a big deal it was, and then doing that practicing in front of my peers, was what really scared me.
Reminds me, bad joke here, of an 80s band, Tears for Peers, right? Or Tears for Fears. For Fears.
Yes. Right.
All right. Hey, we've been having a fun talk. I've been having a little bit too much fun of a talk with Kristen Moeller. Her talk is called Forged by Fire. And if you want to check out this excellent talk, you can go to our show notes page at BeTheTalk.com. We'll have a link right there. You just click it and watch. You can also connect with Kristen Moeller at her website, KristenMoeller.com. It's spelled, Moeller is spelled Moeller, KristenMoeller.com. And in a moment, we'll be back with Kristen for the final word of advice. Everyone wants to change the world, but not everyone knows the first step. Before you can change the world with your talk, it has to be selected. So grab the templates, timelines, and tools that I use to get my talk selected at BeTheTalk.com. We're back with Kristen Moeller for the final word of advice for Talk Universe.
Don't you have the final word, the final word of advice. So I'm a big believer in, this is not one word, never, ever, 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 ever give up, no matter what. Just don't freaking give up.
Was that was the famous graduation speech or line from Churchill, I believe.
Yes, and it's
never,
ever, and add a couple more evers if you start to doubt. I think really that could be my final word. Add more evers. Rather than giving up, just add another ever, 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 ever.
Kristen Moeller, thanks so much for coming on the talk and sharing your wisdom with Talk Universe today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Be The Talk. For tips and resources to help you change the world, go to BeTheTalk.com. See you tomorrow.